Hello, I'm Annie Sloan,
And I'm Tristan Merriam,
and this is The Colourist.
a podcast all about colour and its influence on our lives. So Annie, which colour are we focusing on today?
We are focusing on the earth colours, those rich red browns, and I've got one called Primer Red, but it's actually the earth, actually you dig it up from the earth.
Right.
This is a colour of the earth.
And where has that been used over time? What's the sort of history and the science behind that?
Well, it's, I think, so exciting because you find it in practically every culture. So you'll find it in South America, you'll find it in Africa, all over Europe, North America, India, China, everywhere, because everywhere has got this earth colour, this red colour. And all it would be, you would just dig it up from the ground, and you can almost use it. You've seen it in places. So you were brought up in Devon, and I have lived in Devon as well. And you can actually get red earth in Devon.
The Jurassic Coast?
Oh, everywhere.
I mean, that's a very red part of the coastline. Yeah.
And you can, people will know another place where they live, where it's this earth colour, and you can actually pick it up and add some water to it and paint it. Paint with it. Now, of course, that's a sort of a basic paint. So everybody can find it. You can find it in, as I say, early African art, later African art, Australian work, early First Nation work, South America, the Mayans and the Aztecs, and everybody
So basically everywhere.
Everywhere.
And do you think this was one of the first colours then to be used, as it's so easy to just literally take from the ground, mix it with a bit of water initially?
Yeah.
Do you think that's why
I would think so. If you think actually those cave paintings.
Yeah, I'm picturing all of these things in my head.
Yeah.
And thinking they are very early. That's very early on.
Yeah.
And it's probably because it was so plentiful. Easy to find.
Yeah. And you would have that red earth, and then you'd have a black, because that would be charcoal, and possibly some white if they had that nearby, some chalky stuff, and then also there was a yellow earth. So those were the very first colours. But the primer red, what I call primer red, or that earthy red, is probably the most ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Yeah.
And it actually comes from the oxides in the earth.
It's rust, red oxide.
Right.
Or So.
Amazing. And so primer red is your kind of version of that earthy, reddy, browny colour. Yeah. Describe primer red for people who don't know your colours potentially.
Well, this red is a sort of, I tried to get a sort of an everyman's red, earthy red, and so it's quite brown. It's quite dark. What I wanted was when you added white to it, it would be a sort of slightly pinky. I didn't want too much blue in it, and it would be not too orange. So I've gone for that sort of. I've got another colour called paprika red, which has gone much more orange.
A bit more vibrant.
It's vibrant, and this is an earthy, deep, traditional colour. And are you going to ask me why did I call it primer?
Well, I am, but I was going off in my own head then. I was thinking about the word earthy, and I've never really considered it to be what it actually is, which is from the earth.
It is actually
earthy, and I was thinking about primer red, your primer red, and thinking, earthy is the word that sums it up the best. But that is because it comes from the earth, and it's that sort of colour that you see everywhere, and going back thousands of years. Which is incredible. But yes, why did you call it primer red? Is there a little confusion there with the word primer?
It can be, yes. People think, oh, is it for priming? People have asked me that. No, it's nothing to do with, this isn't the colour for priming. Well, it was originally. So when I was a child, and for centuries before that, because it was a cheap pigment, earthy pigment, you could use it to prime the first coat of anything you painted. So it'd be an oil colour, and it would be for outside. I can just remember always people having this reddy brown colour to prime their woodwork.
To use less of the expensive top coats.
Exactly, of the colours.
So that is in essence a primer in historical terms, it was used for that.
And I wanted to have that colour as well, particularly because it's the colour that goes under gilding.
Yes.
Traditionally. So you had that gorgeous colour. It was bole. It's often called bole, but it's that beautiful reddy colour and it goes under gold. So that was one of my needs. But then I also knew that often when you find old furniture, you'll see that the colour underneath is a sort of a primer red.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the reasons I wanted that colour.
And would you stick with primer red? If you could rename it now, would you stick with primer red, or would you call it something?
I wished I'd called it something. I mean, earthy red might have been. I do love the idea of, meaning. And earthy red has a meaning, but anyway, I think nobody thinks that anymore.
No, but I love the fact that the names of the paints have meaning and history, and this is what this whole podcast is about. I mean, it's exploring the meaning behind the name, and I think, whilst people might not immediately understand it, this is the whole point of doing this. People now do, and primer red, it's got a real lovely history behind it.
It does. The other way I could talk about it is that when you go to an art shop and get oil paints, you would find that there's a sienna red, a burnt umber, siennas and umbers basically, and they come from Italy. And they would have been dug from the soil, and then you would go, if you go to a pigment shop for artist pigment, it isn't just one red, one sienna, or one ochre, or one, I mean, they're also called ochres, or one umber. There are just hundreds.
So what's the difference then, for example, between burnt umber and raw umber?
So raw umber is literally not cooked. I mean, they actually cook it. So the raw umber is quite greeny. It's one of my favourite colours. It was beautiful. I used to use it a lot, and we do use it in our pigments, in our paints now. So raw umber has got a sort of a coolness to it, and burnt umber is more like sort of a chocolate colour.
Amazing.
I know. I love it. And then there is other ones: raw sienna and burnt sienna. Raw sienna is quite yellowy, and then burnt sienna gets pretty fiery.
So much so. So this episode is all about earthy reds and kind of literally coming from the earth and really being inspired by that. And there's one person that we're going to really focus on for this episode, and she lived in a place which she was hugely influenced by in her work and in her home. You've been there to visit this place, so tell us who this person is.
Well, she is Georgia O'Keeffe, an American painter. She was born in Wisconsin, which is in the north of America. And she was born in, I just have to check my notes because I'm really bad at remembering numbers, 1887. And she lived for 98 years, so she died in 1986.
The year I was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. So she's early 20th century, and she was fairly important to probably women at art school at my generation, because she was one of the few painters around. It was people were, when I was at art school, people were like, well, there's not many female painters.
I was going to say, she was a she. So that's a thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah, so that was important.
Yeah.
There are lots of others, but they were not talked about much. And I think she was talked about quite a lot. So.
And why do you love her so much? We've got to assume that people listening might never have heard of her, and maybe they have heard of the name but don't know her work. So what is it for you that really draws you to her? Is it her work you love? Is it her as a person?
Well,
both?
Initially, I didn't know anything about her as a person. I just saw these paintings, which were these. If you heard that someone was a woman and did flower paintings, I think I'd probably think they were sweet little primroses.
Yes, don't swear. I thought you were going to say something else then. What? Sweet little
primroses.
Okay.
Primroses and roses.
Yes,
that
I know.
Sort
it
of
sounds
thing.
very twee.
But you look at her flower paintings, and they are extraordinary.
Yeah.
She denies that to me, they are very sexual. Very sexual indeed.
They definitely have that look about them.
She denies it completely. Now, whether she's doing that because she didn't want to be judged on that and that only. Might have been. But anyway, yes.
So do you think she was making a sort of feminist?
Well, I don't like to say because I don't. She said they weren't.
Yeah.
But maybe they were. I don't know.
When you were at art school, did you kind of analyse the meaning behind the paintings, or was it more the technique?
Some people did, and lots of art historians will do that.
Yeah.
And I suppose, like many painters, you don't want people to analyse it and put it in a box.
No.
So what you're trying to do is going sort of, if that what it that's fine. If that's what you want it to be, that's fine.
Yeah.
But these are, so I'll explain that they're a big. She goes right close up into a flower. So it might be an iris or it might be a beautiful lily, and she goes right into it. So there are sort of the big petals and folds and lines.
We've got to think back to primary school science, all the names of the parts of the flower and the plant.
The sepals. And
yes, exactly.
The petal and the whatever. So
it's kind of close up.
Very close up, and so it's sort of quite feminine anatomy, should we say? And for me, that was like, oh my God, you can do that. So it was shocking, and so I was, shocked by it.
Well, I've got a quote here which I quite like. There's lots of Georgia O'Keeffe quotes.
Are there?
Yeah, as soon as you start, she obviously was a very strong person and she had strong opinions. And this quote I made me chuckle. "I hate flowers. I paint them because they're cheaper than models and they don't move."
Yeah,
which is really good, isn't it?
Yeah. So and then the more you find out about it, the more you realise she wasn't a sweet little lady.
No.
She was a strong woman and led a really interesting life. So
and she was married to photographer Alfred
Stieglitz, yeah. So he was a photographer and art promoter. So that's a lot to do with, I reckon, although she was extremely strong, I think they as a duo really were able to push themselves into society.
And there are so many beautiful photos of her because of that relationship. Really quite stunning photos with the landscape behind her in her home, but they're great photos.
Really great photographs, the two of them together. So I think you've got a story with her, and often women of this period, it's not just their paintings, it's often their story, which I later on found out about and found her very, very exciting. I mean, sometimes I found the photographs of her more exciting than the paintings, although I still have a huge respect for the paintings.
Yeah.
I really, and especially when I went there.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. So that was 2022.
2022, yes. And I went there.
And where is this?
It's in New Mexico. It's near Santa Fe, just north of Santa Fe. She had two houses, but the one house is where she mainly lived, and it's somewhere called Barbecue. It's very odd, Barbecue.
Not barbecue.
Not barbecue, but barbecue, yeah. And it's a beautiful, amazing house. Really inspiring. And I felt very close to her. Two things. That the landscape is immense.
So close your eyes. Describe this landscape. What's it like? We're thinking back to these earthy reds. What?
Well, it's these large landscape. I was going to say they're very flat, but they've got lots of big hills in them.
Yeah.
So it's a bit odd, but they're so wide, and you can stand. So her house is on a little bit of a raised part, and you look over, and you see these incredibly beautiful red cliffs. They are just beautiful. And even the water, there's a river nearby, and the river is red. So the earth is red, and it's a pinky red. It's a very beautiful, warm red. Actually, it's coloured
a bit like Primer Red.
Bit like Primer Red, yeah. And these big skies, and there are lots of what's the big birds?
Eagles?
Eagles, I suppose.
Maybe.
Yes, possibly.
Is
I
that
don't know what they were. But it's that sort of
yeah.
birds of prey
Yes.
flying around. It's just immense. And I did actually think, I can imagine, the First Nation, Native Americans being there, and it did feel very strongly. The landscape is very, very powerful. And she obviously felt that, and she felt at one with nature. And I understood her work on a different level then. And I also saw some work which was different. So it wasn't just the big flowers.
No, I was going to say it was more landscape stuff
lots more
as well.
Landscape. Again, lots of sort of folding and there's big stones around. You go to her house, she obviously collected twigs and branches and skulls.
Yes, I've read about the skulls as well, and they were in the house.
In the house as well, and lots of stones everywhere, beautiful, oddly shaped ones, and yeah, you feel really at one with nature. I mean, that was a part of that time anyway. It's the 30s, 40s, 50s. People were looking at nature in a different way. So in Britain, we had Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, and they were doing these big sculptures, often of bits of stone that they'd picked up. So anyway, so but it was a new sort of thing. It's not the Yorkshire landscape of England, but it was this raw,
no, very different to what we have here.
Yeah.
But
of course, I was brought up in Australia, and we did have a lot of that red earth where we lived, and these vast. It did take me back to that with the big skies. A lot of sky. So I really identified with it. I found very, very exciting. And her house is, well, it's just a dream.
Well, if anyone listening has got a copy of the Colourist magazine, bookazine, should I say, it is in issue 10, which is titled Neutral Hues, and there is a few pages all about your visit to Georgia O'Keeffe's home.
Yeah.
And so you can actually look at the pictures of her home, which you took, or were you there with your photographer, Jessie?
No, we weren't really allowed to take photographs, unfortunately. They're very tight on who they allowed, so we had to use photographs from there. But I did a lot of photography of and Jessie, we had a photographer there. We took photographs of the surrounding landscape, because it was just powerful.
Amazing. What was her actual interior like? Obviously, you've described the collection of stones and ornaments and things like that. Was there much art on the walls? How was the design of the house?
First of all, you have to remember, this is not a normal house. She did not, and I love her for it, she didn't build a sort of European style house and plonk it down. No, she looked at the houses around, and this would have been Pueblo Indian, Native Americans. Forgive me if I don't use the right words. I don't always know what they are. But this is a culture. We'd been in Santa Fe, and we'd been to the Folk Museum then. We'd seen a lot of beautiful work, and, introduced to the work of the Native Americans there. And so she was very much at one with that. And so the houses are not... I think there are lots of rules now as well, but I think then she would have just done what she wanted, which was, they're sort of, they're like mud shapes. They're not squared. Everything's softer, and her house has got rounded edges, and there are courtyards and doorways that are. I felt like they were sort of. Someone had got some clay and just sort of formed it.
Molded it and
sculpted it.
Maybe it's to blend in with the landscape.
Well, I suppose it's
using... more?
I suppose...
Or inspired by?
I think it's using the materials of the landscape.
Okay.
And so that's how you develop it. It doesn't come out of something... It doesn't come out of the head. It comes out of the natural...
Are they adobe?
Adobe, that is the word I've been trying to think of. Thank you, Vincent.
Oh, he's very useful, isn't he?
He's got his uses. So adobe, yes, that is the word.
Yes.
And so...
And does that stem from the word daub?
No.
No. I'm thinking of daub the kind of using mud and clay and...
But I don't think so.
No.
I think this is probably...
Anyway, off on a tangent there.
I'd have to look
But
that
Adobe.
up. I don't know. It's
Yes.
Adobe. Very soft and beautiful. So her house to begin with is just fabulous. We will put some photographs off when we post this on my Instagram page, and I'll show you the first door that you see and the rooms you go through, because we're able to get some photographs. So that's the house. Just forget everything else. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, and I think it's really exciting and interesting that you understood her work more after visiting. I think that's
very much so.
Really quite interesting.
She didn't actually. I don't think there were any paintings of hers in her house.
That's unusual.
Well, that might be probably something to do with other things like insurance. I don't know.
Maybe.
But we were able to. Her paintings will be now worth thousands. I went to a gallery in Santa Fe and saw her work there, and but I've also, I'm very familiar with her work because I'm fascinated by it actually. I think it's really, really interesting. And see what colours she used with it, all these red things, and these big skulls. There's skulls in the place. In the house.
But she describes skulls as being very beautiful and practical. She doesn't see it as a kind of, scary, morbid thing.
No, well, I don't either.
She's fascinated with the makeup of them.
You'll see.
I'm looking at one now on your mantelpiece.
I have one on my mantelpiece. I have several. And they are skulls from various places I've been to. Actually, I found them, and I find them really beautiful. I know people think they're more, but they're not. I find them. It's just the beauty of life.
It's definitely one of those things. You either do get it or you don't.
Beauty of life. I mean, they're extraordinary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, so what I found fascinating is that not only was she really influenced by her surroundings, she was also interested in Japanese art and Japanese things. And of course, in Japanese art, you often get, actually, I've got one over there, there's a little box. And it's a red lacquer, it's a black lacquer box with red on it. And it's that same earthy red. And it's that lacquer and that red that you see on lacquer, which is, again, that sort of, my primer is a little bit less red, but it's all
but using that colour in a completely different way, isn't it? Completely different from the earthy kind of look, where it's very muted and matte, to taking it to something quite glossy. And
exactly. So there's lots of ways you can take
there are. So thinking about primer red then, how do you use it today? You've obviously, we know the history of it, we know where it's come from.
Yeah.
I think you should tell people how you feel it can be used really well and successfully.
Well, the first one is what I already mentioned, which is under gilding. Amazing. With that's traditional. That's just perfectly beautiful. Under old furniture, you can use it there, and a colour on top. The first colours I used to use were Aubusson with the primer red underneath.
Gorgeous combination.
Just looks amazing. Yeah. It really is beautiful. But then you look at other things and you see that it's part of Swedish painting. It's part of, add white to it, it becomes a pink. It's also part of, I also said, the Japanese look. So there's a famous American, no, where was she? Irish lacquer painter, who used to work with Le Corbusier, called Eileen Gray. She's also in the Colourist, and she used to do beautiful things. So she would use red, or that primer reddy colour, with black and make it shiny. Beautiful. I think actually when you start using it, you'll find you can put practically anything with it, and it will start to look great.
It is one of those colours, I have to say. It just grounds the
everything.
Other colours. I've recently used it all over a piece, the whole thing, primer red, but there must be, I don't know, something like 8 other colours, which sounds quite crazy, on top of it, in small parts, but the whole thing works because of the primer red. And it just pulls it all together.
It's a sort of neutral.
Yes, it is.
So it pulls it down. And then, yes, you could use it with colours over it, and really practically everything works with it. In fact, the early great painters, Rembrandt, etc., or Michelangelo, would have used a primer color to ground their paintings.
And then build things up on top.
So they wouldn't paint on white, they painted on primer red.
Yes.
So that meant that they had a colour to go darker or lighter on, rather than going white when you can't go whiter.
No. And do you suggest, does it work well on its own? Because everything we've said so far is kind of primer red with this, under this, as an accent to this. Would you ever paint a piece solely in primer red?
I wouldn't, because for me it looks too much like just a wood, and I'm one who likes to use and combine colours anyway. And when I've seen, maybe in real life it looks better than it does not in real life. What am I saying? On photographs.
Yes.
Photographs, you photograph them and it just looks brown. And it looks like wood.
So it really sings when it's combined.
With it combined, it looks fantastic. Actually, one of my earliest pieces is actually at the warehouse, and I potato printed, and I think it's dark blue, Aubusson, primer red, and a yellow like a Arles. And that's a great combination.
Well, you're trying. You've said you're trying to do a piece for each episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
You haven't done the primer red one yet, but by the time this comes out, you will have done. Yeah. So you've got to get your thinking cap on of how you can.
Maybe I could recreate that early piece.
Yeah, that would be a cool idea.
Yeah, I've still got that early piece, or maybe I'll not do another one and just
just show that
done
one.
It.
Just shush, yeah, no one will know. I mean, whenever I use primer red, I love it, and I find it very easy to use with other colours. It's easy to me. So I would encourage people to have a go with it.
What I'd like to say is that when I first brought my colours out, it was one of our top sellers.
And was it in the original 12?
It was one of the original 12. It's number 20.
Right.
It was an essential, and everybody bought it, and it was under everything, and everyone loved it. And it was used and used and used. And then it became very unfashionable. Just stopped being used. Not stopped. I mean, I used to think, well, maybe I should get rid of it. But I thought, I can't. It's essential. And now it's come back. Everything, those reds and warmth, those warming sort of coming back. And I think people are mixing as well. So it is a great mixer colour. So you can mix it into other colours, which just will sort of cool it down a little.
And you say you've seen a lot of people a lot of painters in America using it,
America.
Which is interesting.
Yes, yeah. I don't know quite why that is.
I was just.
I think mainly because perhaps Americans, it's part of their history, that colour, and maybe they're mixing with some red as well to give it that warmth.
I suppose, though, going back to the beginning of this episode, it's in everyone's history and culture. It's found all over the world. You could say the same for Australia. You could say the same for parts of Devon. Basically everywhere.
It is.
So it really should be a colour that's used everywhere, because it comes from the earth. And
my favourite is it with blue. I think it looks beautiful.
Yes.
So if you go back to the complementaries, you've got a primer red, which you could say is a sort of orange, and opposite to that is the blues. The greeny blues look beautiful, but all the blues look fantastic with it, and that's one of my favourite combos, blue and.
It is very beautiful. It's a very, very tasteful colour. Yeah. And is it also available in a wall paint?
It is.
It is.
Oh my goodness! It looks fantastic as a wall.
Okay, we're off now.
Yeah, I can't wait to use it. I want to use it somewhere in my house, and I don't know where.
No, you haven't got it in your home at all?
No, I haven't got anywhere, and I really, where can I use it? Where can I use it?
Yeah.
I'm going to be changing around things in my house, so...
There we go.
You might find it somewhere.
So you can bring it into your home in more than just on furniture. You can actually use it on walls as well.
I did something beautiful with a dado a big high dado in the primer red, and above it the sort of ochre colour. I don't know what colour it is. Yeah, old ochre. It's just gorgeous.
Well, when we release this episode, I think we need a few posts on the channels, on the Annie Sloan Home and Chalk Paint, showing primer red used wall paint, furniture, chalk paint, to show the versatility of it and how well it can be combined with other colours.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else we need to say about this episode, Georgia O'Keeffe? Is there anything we've missed?
There's probably 100 things we've missed. But what I want to do is that I'm going to Mexico, and when I'm in Mexico, I'm going to see a rather amazing painter and her house, and that is.
I wonder who that could be.
Who
Mexico.
could that be in Mexico? Frida Kahlo.
Oh, amazing! I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous.
So I'm going to go to Frida Kahlo's house. I'm going to hopefully take photographs and do all sorts of things. And so she's, in a way, they're very complimentary.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of works as a little cluster of episodes to follow this theme.
And it's red and blue.
Exactly.
I mean, perfect.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, we will definitely focus an episode on Frida and the amazing Frida Blue, which is your colour.
Yeah.
But we're going to wait till you've returned and you've seen it, because I think you've said just how important it was for you to visit Georgia O'Keeffe's house and kind of understand it all. So that's coming as the next one, and that is very exciting.
Well, now I'm just seeing red everywhere in my room. It's incredible. I've just realised that on my pottery, I've got a jug up there. I've got some early English paintings. I mean, it is everywhere. Just keep looking.
It is, and now you just need to paint a wall in it, and you're on fire. But it is everywhere. It is, and I think people will listen to this and look around and see this colour everywhere. Well, it's been a lovely, fantastic episode as always. I've really enjoyed getting to know this colour. We know where we're going next.
Yep.
In the meantime, though, please follow us on social media. So
Annie Sloan Instagram.
And I am Doghead Designs. And there is also Annie Sloan Home and Chalk Paint, which are the official channels for Annie Sloan.
Yes. And so, until next time, thanks very much for listening. I've just been talking to Vincent. He said something which I thought was really good. He said, do you know, red shouts at you, but primer red, completely different. Yeah. Is that what you said, Vincent?
Yeah, it doesn't jump out at you quite as much as you think a red does.
And we've spoken about that red hits your eyes.
The first colour.
Yeah, it's like the sign of danger and warning it can be.
But primer red is very, really quiet and, you know, rather sort of sophisticated and but it does everything. I do think that's interesting. It goes from being very sophisticated, Renaissance, to, I don't know,
louder, brighter.
What?
Like the colour of the floor.
Yeah.
The colour of the floor. Just the earth.
So without getting into the technical makeup and the secrets of the paint too much, what's in primer red then? Why is it so different? How is it so earthy and grounded?
Red oxide. It is actually literally oxide.
That's so interesting. And where
iron oxide.
Yeah,
it's iron.
It's elemental.
I should have said yes. It's elemental. Oh, very good.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Compared to Emperor's Silk, then, which is a very vibrant red, it's just a completely different pigment.
That comes from cadmium red. Or, I mean, it's not cadmium red, obviously, because cadmium is poisonous. But that's imitating a cadmium, a vermilion. It's brilliant red. But this is literally from the earth. It's iron oxide. It's probably one of the first things made.
Colours to be discovered as a colour. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just crazy, isn't it, that they're both classed as red, but they are so different.
Yeah. Well, you've got to put them somewhere, but it is. Yes, it's not the primary colours. Mm-hmm. That's why when you're talking about pigments, you know, it comes from all sorts of things. Anyway,
fascinating.
Yeah, it is gorgeous, and I love the way this sort of funny colour, browny reddy colour, add white to it, and you've just got these beautiful pinks. Isn't that gorgeous? I
So gorgeous.
Wonderful. And you've got, sepias and all of those lovely colours. Gosh, getting carried away now.
Very romantic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dreaming about colours.
Who needs a cup of coffee?
Yes.